So I am Anna Brown. I'm the events manager at Katie Budget Books. I've been with the store for 11 years, although they hid me in the back for a while. So you may not have seen me for some time. I am so excited to have this opportunity to present these kinds of events. I know everything's weird because we're all virtual now and we miss our in-person events, but it does give us the opportunity to have a whole bunch of authors together that we probably wouldn't be able to get together in person. And I am particularly thrilled about this parenting panel series we've been doing because I am also a mom. So I'm not at all an expert on parenting and certainly not on work-life balance. I'm hoping to learn as much from this as you guys are. But I do have 3 boys at home. So just to give you my parenting credentials, I have my oldest son is about to turn 18, which I cannot believe. And then I have a 3.5-year-old and a 1.5-year-old. So I am trying to work while also raising them. And it has particularly been a challenge this year. So I am really excited about this specific panel because I know we're all sort of reworking how our work and life are separated right now. And so figuring that out has been kind of top of everyone's mind in a way that it necessarily wasn't before. So I am really excited to have our panelists here to talk about that tonight. So for those of you that maybe aren't familiar with Zoom webinar, we are using the webinar feature of Zoom. So you can see us, but we can't see you. And that is just so that we can keep the panelists in front of you at all times. There is a Q&A box in addition to the regular chat. I will be monitoring both, but if you have any questions, please type them in the Q&A box. And I will keep an eye on that. The way that this runs is that I introduce everybody to you. Each of the authors is going to have a window to talk about their book. We're going to sort of do an interview with each of them. And then we will open up to attendee Q&As, but feel free to type in your question at any point that it occurs to you, and it will stay on my list until we get to the attendee Q&A at the end. So we are absolutely thrilled to have these panelists with us tonight. I think we have a great sort of cross-section of work-life balance material here. So first we have Joanne Lublin, the author of Power Moms, and then Shari Medini and Carissa Tunis, authors of, which way? My screen has slipped and it always confuses me. Parenting While Working from Home, which may be particularly relevant to a lot of you right now. And Andre and Jeff Schinnebarger, who are the authors of Love or Work. So I am going to introduce Joanne more fully first because she's going to be our first speaker. So Joanne, I'm going to say it wrong now because I said it wrong in practice. Joanne Lublin, author of Power Moms, was management news editor for the Wall Street Journal, working with reporters in the US and abroad until she retired in April 2018. She continues to frequently appear at conferences to discuss leadership, executive women, and other management issues. She's actually been doing a lot today. She created the journal's first career advice column in 1993 and kept writing its Your Executive Career column until May 2020. She shared its Pulitzer Prize in 2003 for stories about corporate scandals. She won the 2018 Lifetime Achievement from the Loeb Awards, the highest accolade in business journalism. She earned a bachelor's degree in journalism with honors from Northwestern University and a master's degree in communications from Stanford University. So Joanne, we are so thrilled to have you here with us tonight. Do you want to start by just telling us kind of generally what Power Moms is about?
Sure. So Power Moms is my second book. If you look over my shoulder, you can see the cover of my first book. And Power Moms represents interviews with 111 women. 86 of them are executive mothers, roughly evenly divided between the boomers, which is my generation, and the Gen Xers / millennials, roughly 2/3 Gen Xers, 1/3 millennials. Separate from those 86 executive mothers, I interviewed 25 adult daughters of those power moms from the boomers to find out what was it like growing up in a household where mom had an executive role and was, to the daughter at least, larger than life.
So I loved Power Moms. I just want to say that. And it is a business book that just happens to be about working moms, which I don't know why was not what I was picturing. I was picturing a parenting book about work. So it was fascinating to me that it was a business book that just happened to be about working moms. So the first thing I kind of want to talk about is the difference between work-life balance, which is what I titled this panel, and work-life sway, which is the phrase that you use most often. Can you explain the distinction and why that's important?
Yeah, so I think for decades, working mothers especially have been struggling with this thing called work-life balance. And it's crazy. It's an impossible ideal. And in fact, in that first book, Earning It, I have one chapter about working mothers because that book reflects interviews with 52 high-ranking executive women. And the chapter is called Manager Moms Are Not Acrobats. And that was a quote from one of those 52 women who argued that this idea of work-life balance is totally impossible. But when I started reporting Power Moms, I was unaware that there was something new that had taken its place. And it's called work-life sway. And I became so enamored of this concept that I told my publisher I wanted to make that the subtitle of the book. I wanted to call the book Power Moms, Secret of Work-Life Sway. And the publisher said, what you're talking about. And she was right, because when I heard this phrase, I didn't know either. But I heard it from one of those Gen Xers, younger executive women, the first one I actually interviewed for the book. And as she explained it to me, it's this notion of we accept the fact that there's no such thing as work-life balance. And we acknowledge the fact that when we have to be 110% present for work, we will do so. But guess what? Life intrudes, as we've all learned, that, you can't always be 110% there for work, especially if you're working from home. And so when family needs cause demands, you sway in the moment, and you don't give yourself this big, heavy guilt trip about the fact that, oh my gosh, I just had to walk out of the Zoom meeting because whatever just happened. And when she described this to me, I was like, I'm sorry, I still can't picture what you're talking about. And so she gave me a great example, as you will remember from the book. This woman is an executive at Philips, which is a worldwide big auction house. And the day her oldest son took a step for the first time, a text popped up on her phone, and it was the nanny showing her a live video of her little 1-year-old taking his first step. And so she swayed in the moment, and she was there for him, even though she was a couple blocks away in Manhattan. And then when it was done, she swayed back to work.
And that has absolutely been true for me, that sway, that and it alleviates some of the guilt. So I love that concept, which is why I kind of wanted you to highlight it. So the next thing is about the fact that this is really a book about business and how business impacts working parents. And some of our attendees tonight might be in a position to make changes with their organizations. And you talk a lot about a lot of things in your book about changes that need to be made and how businesses support parents so that businesses are more attractive to working parents and so that parents feel like they can work successfully. What are some things that people that are in a position to make change in their organization should be advocating for?
Well, I think there are a number of things that employers could be doing. And in fact, I devote the whole last chapter of the book to making work workable for parents, for men and women alike. But I think this experiment we've had on a nationwide basis, where many of those of us in white collar jobs have been working from home, has proven beyond a shadow of a doubt that it is a way to accommodate the needs of working parents. And so I think the most important thing that employers could do is to make permanent work from home arrangements, whether it's on a part-time or full-time basis. And there's several surveys out there suggesting that that is already the direction, at least, that big companies are planning to go. But I think a second thing that bosses and employers could do is normalize this notion of parental leave, especially hopefully paid parental leave. so that it is socially acceptable for men to take their full amount as well as for women. And that means that when a guy is about to become a dad, and particularly for the first time, and he's eligible to take that paid parental leave, the bosses should be asking that guy, when is he taking the leave, not if. Because we've seen, as parental leave has spread to the men as well as the women, many couples in which they do back-to-back leaves. She goes back to work after a couple months, and then he begins the leave. And so then the baby ends up being cared for by one parent or another for the first 6 months of his or her life. And I think the third thing that employers could do is to have senior level executives, especially those who have children, mentor younger, ambitious managers who perhaps have not had kids yet and can't imagine ever getting into senior management if they have young children, especially the women. And that means not just acting as a role model, but perhaps doing a shadowing program where an ambitious lower level manager or middle manager gets to tag along with a senior executive who has kids and gets some, two cubits to how to make it work.
Awesome. And I love that the timing of this book was very perfect, I think, because a lot of what you were talking about was flexible work arrangements. And this is a time where a lot of companies have had to experiment with that maybe wouldn't have otherwise. So pushing for that to continue is so important. You also address the mental load and household duties in depth. Will you talk a bit about how those common struggles influence women's ability to try and sway between work and home, and how they feel about how they're doing about that?
Well, one of the biggest differences I saw in this cross-generational study was that things are a lot better for those Gen Xers and millennial moms because they're being smarter about who they choose to spend their life with. And they're setting the standards and the rules of the game at the outset of making that commitment to that woman or man who they've decided is their life partner by saying, I want to be co-parenting. I want us to both have successful careers, and I want us both to share the load of running the household. But that's really, really different than the mental load. And the mental load is what some people call the third shift. It's this idea of who's in charge of making sure that everything gets done and everybody gets to be where they need to be when they need to be. And especially when you're trying to homeschool your kids, or at least coordinate with their teacher, who's going to be in charge of the 6-year-old and who's going to be in charge of the 4-year-old, and when do I get to do my Zoom calls with my boss? And so I went back after the book was actually in production last summer and revisited with a couple of the women who had already been working remotely at the point when I interviewed them in 2019 to say, okay, how's it going now with COVID? And in one case, again, a younger generation executive, she and her husband had both been trying to start their own businesses, and suddenly they have a 4-year-old and a 6-year-old, and they're also both at home. And so what they ended up doing was every Sunday night, they put together an Excel spreadsheet and they plotted out their day from 7 a.m. to 8 p.m. for the coming work week as to who was going to do what, who was going to work with the older child about, her schoolwork, who was going to make lunch, who was going to do the bath. And then realizing you can't possibly plan for the unplannable, they revisited this schedule every night.
That is awesome. And I did love seeing some of that techniques for how people have already been dealing with this that have done it successfully, because we are still struggling with a technique that will work for my family at home.
You got to adapt.
And I think that's our problem. We want a strategy to just work forever. And then when it doesn't work, we both get frustrated. You also address working mom guilt in a lot of the book. Let's talk for a minute about why we feel guilty and what we can do about it.
One frankly, it surprised me to see that it was still happening to the extent it was in the younger executive women, although it was far less prevalent than among the boomer moms. And again, just to put this in context, you know, when I was having children and when other boomer moms were having children, it wasn't even super acceptable for us to be coming back to work. And people would, in the case of my own situation, my mother was a teacher and I was already a very successful journalist. And she said, well, of course you're going to switch to becoming a teacher when I was pregnant for the first time. I was like, well, why? She said, well, so you can have the summers off, with your baby. I was like, okay, but I don't like teaching. And so, the working mother guilt not only persists in the younger generation, it persists because we have gendered expectations of roles. And so as much as the dads want to be helping, and they shouldn't have to be helping, they should be partnering, the mother feels like at the end of the day, if he doesn't do the walk the right way, then she's going to redo it. Although again, a number of those younger executive mothers said, I could care less, if he puts the 3-year-old's clothes on backwards, inside out, or mismatches the socks, as long as we get him out the door to the daycare center. But I think one of the most powerful chapters in the book, and the one that the Wall Street Journal excerpted, was a chapter on 10 ways to ditch working mother guilt. And the idea for that chapter came from that very mom who gave me the title of that chapter in the first book, the chapter, what was called Manager Moms Are Not Acrobats. And she said to me, you need to have a chapter about ditching working mother guilt. And I was like, okay, well, what's your best tip? And she said, well, my best tip is rather than giving yourself a hard time, because once again, we're not sitting down to dinner until 7 o'clock because I had to, finish that crash project for work. Celebrate the fact that you're sitting down for dinner with your family, and be positive in terms of how you're looking at what you think is a terrible guilt-ridden thing that you're doing. A couple of the other things that I thought were really great was, one is this idea of trying to use an occasional vacation day as a getaway with your kids. And so there's this great example of this younger power mom who takes 3 days of vacation every quarter so that there's a mama day for each one of her 3 boys. And the boys are fairly young, but she helps guide them. They get to choose what they do on their mama day. And it's very, very special. I also think it's really important to carve out time for yourself. Too often we think self-care is selfish. It's not, it's selfless. And again, there's this great example of one of the younger power moms who negotiated with her husband. I'm sure he gets his own little, separate daddy time. But in her case, it's 2 hours every Sunday that she can do whatever she wants. And it's great bonding between him and, their son. But when she told me that story, it reminded me of when my son was about 2 or 3, and I really wanted to have some time alone. And he was playing with his dad, he was perfectly fine. And so I locked the bathroom door and I draw the bath and right, the 3-year-old is on the door. Mommy, Dan, mommy's having me time. You. And I said, no, go play with dad. And when I'm done with the bath, I will read you a good night bedtime story.
Yes, there is.
I'll make it into the book, by the way.
There is that weird phenomenon, though. That's an issue in our house, too, that daddy's playing with them. He's interacting. He's a very hands-on dad. But when mama disappears, they still want mama. I mean, I am pretty amazing, so I don't really blame them. Well, thank you so much, Joanne. We will bring you back in for the joint Q&A at the end, but I am going to introduce Shari and Carissa now. So Shari Medini is the co-author of Parenting While Working From Home, and she is a writer and co-owner of AdoreThemParenting.com. Her parenting articles have been published in dozens of print and online publications. Shari's past experience includes working with children and families in the mental health field, mentoring and speaking as a mindset coach, and working as a freelance writer and marketing strategist for companies across the country. She understands the demands of working from home and loves sharing tips to help balance it all. When she's not on her laptop, Shari can be found spending quality time with her husband and 2 sons exploring their hometown in Pennsylvania. So hi, Shari.
Hello, thanks for having us.
Man. And then Carissa Tunis, also co-author of Parenting While Working from Home, is a writer, event organizer, and co-owner of AdoreThemParenting.com. Through these ventures, she has been able to share inspiring, heartfelt insight with large audiences, both within local communities and across the country. As a work-from-home mom of 4 children, Carissa understands the need for family-focused organization and time management. She consistently provides insight into child behavior that has helped fellow parents achieve their goals of calmer, happier homes. Carissa also makes it a priority to soak in all of the Southern specialties that South Carolina has to offer with her husband and their children. Welcome, Carissa.
Thank you so much for having us.
Thank y'all for joining us. So you also had an excellently timed book, but you guys have been working from home for a while. This is not new for you since the pandemic.
Right. Both of us have been working from home for about a decade. So it was good timing that everything that we feel like we've learned and adapted to and had to figure out, now is a great chance to try to pass that along to fellow parents and say, here's a couple tidbits. This might be brand new to you, but we've figured out how to make this work for our families.
Okay, so the first thing I want to talk about for attendees that haven't read your book yet is that you've organized the book by month. Can you kind of talk about why you decided to do it that way?
So as we all know, parenting in July is very different than parenting in December. There are different challenges, different fun things to do. So we wanted to address that. But it was a really great way that we could share a lot of information and pack a lot of information into the book without it feeling really overwhelming. That we wanted parents, I'm guilty of this, of buying a parenting book, reading a couple chapters, putting it down and forgetting about it. But that monthly thing, it's kind of that cue. It's a new month, pick the book back up. You can go through your journal prompts. You can go through the information that we're sharing for that month, but hopefully it's a little bit of a reminder and a checkpoint to check back in.
Couldn't unmute myself there for a second, sorry. So one of the things you guys talk about is housework and family days, and I love that idea. Can you explain that a little bit for attendees?
Yes. So I started doing this thing when I had 3 toddlers all in the house that every day I have to wash bottles, I have to answer emails, make everyone lunch. There's always things that you have to do every day. But when I was trying to exceed in so many different areas, I felt like I was falling short and I wasn't accomplishing anything that I wanted to accomplish at the level that I wanted. So I decided to pick an overall arching theme for the day. So I still have all my things I have to do, but I have house days, I have work days, and I have family days. So on house days, in between sending important emails, I'm starting a load of laundry. I'm, switching out the dishwasher. I'm doing those kind of things, and I'm trying to tackle my house list. Then on work days, I'm really focused on work. Maybe my kids get to watch a little extra TV. Maybe, I let the dishes pile up in the sink till later that night, till everyone's in bed. Whatever that looks like, my focus for that day is work. And then I also have family days where I really try to check out from work, from the house stuff, and just focus on the kids, whether we leave the house and go do something fun, or even if it's just running around the yard for a couple hours of uninterrupted time. But if I just set one overarching focus for the day, I feel like I can accomplish that and I can do it really well.
And to go along with that, and similar to what Joanne was talking about, that perfect balance, I feel like a lot of times we get that question of how can I have better balanced days? But we recommend to zoom out and how can I balance my week a little bit better? So over the course of a week, I might have a project I want to accomplish. I want to make sure I reconnect and kind of fill my kids' buckets up a little bit. Did we get enough time to hang out? And then the house too. Can we walk through the living room? You know, like over the course of a week, if all of those things are happening, I call it a success.
Yes, and I love that because I do think, and I think this was kind of a theme in all of the books, that as parents, we tend to feel like we're failing at something all the time and focus on the thing that's not getting done instead of all the great things that are, which really takes us out of that, like enjoying our families and our children when we have that running list.
For sure.
So, one of the things I've heard about the most since a lot of parents unexpectedly started working from home during all of this is how hard it is to get anything done. And obviously, there's a lot of reasons for that if your children are still learning remotely in our home or whatever your situations may be. But I think part of it is that when it was an unexpected thing, no one really set up a workspace. And you guys talk a little bit about how to set up a more productive workspace. So, can you talk a little bit about that for the attendees?
Yes, I have actually moved a lot over the last couple years. And so at times I've had my own home office, and other times I'm working out of a corner in the kitchen with the kids all around me doing virtual schooling. It's really been kind of crazy at times, but I will also say too, it really changes the ages with the ages of your kids. When I had little toddlers in the house, I wanted to always be able to see them. And so I would kind of hop from room to room with my laptop and try to work when they were entertained with something else. Something that Shari and I even mentioned in the book is we would often make bath time productive time. I'd put my kids in the bathtub, throw in a whole bunch of random toys that weren't always used in the bathtub, but just try to mix it up and make it fun. And then I'd sit in there with my laptop and I'd work on emails for a while. And they really enjoyed that time, and it kept them contained while I was getting some stuff done. But what I've learned is me personally, I love office accessories. I could just go nuts with all kinds of things, but I have to be really intentional with what do I need to accomplish for my day. And I try to keep all of that either on a cart with wheels on it so I can kind of move around the house as needed, or even all in my computer bag if I need to jump and go work, in other locations or coffee shops or wherever. But I try to just focus on like what is needed to get me through the week. And then things that I'm not looking at regularly, I keep in a filing cabinet somewhere in my house. And even that moves from time to time. But I know it's hard. It's hard when we're wearing a lot of different hats and we're working a lot of different places, and from day to day, it can look so different. So anyway, I hope that helps.
Yeah, and even outside of the physical workspace, something we touch on a little bit in the book too is to shift your mindset a little bit and think of your kids as your little coworkers. Even in an office scenario, we hear from so many people, like, even when I was in the office, my coworkers are popping in constantly, and I'm getting phone calls, or, we need something. And while the requests are going to be a little different, hopefully your coworkers were not asking you for like help in the bathroom, or they needed a snack, or they spilled milk on the carpet. But kind of the same thing applies, especially when we're working virtually from home, that it's okay if you're on a call to say, can I put you on hold for a minute? And then go help them in the bathroom and just come back and say, oh, so sorry about that, I'm back. You don't need to explain. You don't need to go through all of that. You can still stay professional. And I think just having those little things and shifting a little bit to accept that you are going to have interruptions. We are just going to have to work in chunks of time and kind of go with the flow a little bit more.
And I want to add one thing to that Shari really helped me with 4 children in the house. I have a lot of interruptions, and I sometimes would feel really guilty for taking time away from work to go run around outside with them for 15 minutes or sit on the floor and play with them. But Shari's made the point before that when we used to work in an office, you get interrupted by coworkers, or you just need that mental break and you'd go to the water cooler, or you'd, take a lap around the office and talk to people. When I started looking at my kids almost as like my little coworkers, it kind of released some of that guilt and allowed me to appreciate those interruptions and that downtime and be more intentional with when I do take that time, making that count with them and kind of clearing my head before I jump back into work mode.
Okay, you guys also talk about self-care throughout the day, which I think ties in kind of well with that, with the intentional breaks. Can you give a few examples of some of the quick self-care things that moms can just kind of fit in while they're shifting from one thing to the next?
I can jump in if you want. So those self-care things, like you said, we explain that in the book as well, but trying to be intentional about, is there something in the morning that I can do? Is there something in the afternoon? Is there something in the evening? And trying to give some of those ideas. So one of them is, maybe after you drop the kids off at school or get them set up with their virtual school, then instead of diving right into work, you take 10 to 15 minutes to eat a real breakfast, drink coffee, and maybe read something that might be inspirational or plan out your day a little bit. Just a couple minutes can help set you up so that you're not feeling pulled throughout your day. The other thing is at this stage of life, I'm still kind of multitasking. But what I mean by that is that my kids are often my break from work, and my work is often my break from kids. And it allows me to not feel super guilty about either one, because I still feel like I'm accomplishing something. I love, especially when my kids were little and they were at that stage where they wanted to watch the same movie every single day. I would sit down on the couch and I would snuggle with them, but I would also pop in an earbud and listen to a favorite podcast, or like secretly watch Netflix on my phone to the side, so that we were like snuggling and spending time together and relaxing together, but we were both kind of doing something that we enjoyed. And then the same kind of thing. I mean, I love what I do, and I know I'm really fortunate to have that, but I kind of love when I get to just put on my headphones and go into writing mode, and I don't feel guilty that I'm not engaging with my kids at that moment, because I know that this work is important too.
Yes, and I know that a lot of parents are not blessed to have jobs that they love, and I'm sorry to you guys in the audience that are not in that position. I also really enjoy my work. And with my oldest son, I was a single mom and I didn't have the opportunity to not work. But with my younger ones, there was kind of that struggle between, am I going to stay home full time and just be a mom, or do I want to keep engaging with my job? And it has helped me so much to really look at what my work is giving back to the world, so I can feel like I'm doing something worthwhile when I'm not at home, and to recognize that I'm a better mom when I also have this thing I'm passionate about outside the home. Like, I love my children so much, but if I was with them full time, I might go a little crazy. So I admire you guys so much for being able to work and be around your kids full time. And I know they're school age now, so not full time as much these days, but
Except
I'm not sure I could.
Carissa has a baby at home now too. So
Yeah, I
she
have a
gets to start back
7-month-old.
over.
Excellent.
Yeah.
And congratulations.
Thank you.
And then the last question I have for you guys for this period is the section on simplifying your life was really fascinating to me, because I think, like maybe a lot of book people, I'm not a hoarder in general. I am definitely a book hoarder, but I also tend to like just kind of collect stuff, which I'm not sure really has anything to do with being a book person. I'm not intentional about clearing out stuff. And you guys talk a little bit about clearing out not just physical things, but also some of those scheduled activities and how that helps with the work-life balance. So can you explain that a little bit?
Yeah, I mean, for us, family time is really important. And anytime that we say yes to an activity for one of the kids, that means that that kid, and most likely my husband or I, are giving up time being at home to run them to their activities. And activities are definitely important. My children are involved in sports, they're involved in extracurriculars at school, but we try to really be careful not to overdo it. And for a while now, not all of them have done activities at the same time. They each kind of pick different seasons, and it is fun too, because then that means that the whole family can go support them versus dividing and conquering, which we do sometimes have to do. Some things do overlap, but it's just very important to us that we're asking, is this really benefiting our child? Is this really benefiting our family as a whole? And can we still make enough family time a priority other nights of the week, or find those other moments? I think a lot of parents just think that they owe it to their kids to put them in all these different, give them all these different experiences, but kids only get one childhood, and there's so much pressure on them with school nowadays, and they just really need that downtime. And I found that when our schedules were busier, my children were often more unhappy. And now, having a more relaxed schedule, they are able to fully enjoy those few things that they are doing outside of the home, and then really relaxing and enjoying their downtime when they are home. And overall, it just works so much better for us.
Yeah, absolutely. I take notes from Carissa a lot with this, because we always feel that pressure, right? That all their friends are doing this, or you're going to fall behind, or whatever else that is. And it's nice to have someone that I talk to on a daily basis that kind of gives you permission to let go of something, and to constantly be evaluating. Are they happy? Are they enjoying this? Are they excited to go? Or would they rather be home playing a game with their siblings? And it's so important to keep evaluating that at any point. So we are here to give you permission to, even if you just need to, I've done this with friends where I'm like, just take a break for a little bit and see what happens. And if they miss it and are begging to go back, you have your answer. And if they're kind of okay with it, and a lot of times if that question's there, like, do we continue this? Do we need to drop an activity? Do a trial run, give them a break. And if you see a big change in mood, that they're happier, more cooperative, more energetic, more talkative, I think it's just important to kind of keep tabs on our kids and ourselves. Are we doing okay? As parents, that matters too. We don't have to we don't have to be the chaperone every single night of the week. It's our choice.
I love that. And that was kind of a new idea to me. One of our previous parenting panelists, Pam Lobley, had written actually a memoir, but about a summer where she just told her boys, who were young at the time, that they weren't going to have any plans at all for the summer. They were just going to hang out, and how that started kind of badly for their family, because they were every day we're just like, what are we going to do? But how it ended up where
Sounds
they were
familiar, right? We all face that in 2020.
They all ended up so much more relaxed. And so I love that as I'm doing all these parenting panels and reading so many more parenting books, seeing all of this, like, it's a struggle today, this idea that we have to have our kids involved in everything or we're depriving them of something. But sometimes having them involved in everything is depriving them of like that time to relax and have some peace and spend time with the whole family together.
Or find what they're truly passionate about. Some of the things that they might want to spend the rest of their life doing, it's hard to figure that out if you don't give them the chance to explore and experiment and do nothing and be bored and see what they're drawn to a little bit.
All right. Well, thank you, ladies, so much.
Thank you.
I am going to introduce Andre and Jeff Schennebarger. Andre is a co-author of Love Her Work. She's an adventurer who loves seeing the world. Born in Bolivia, she has a deep passion for building community with marginalized people groups. She works for Grady Memorial Hospital in Atlanta as a physician assistant and is an adjunct professor for Emory University. She is an advisor to Plywood People and host of the Love Her Work podcast. Hi, Andre.
Hi.
And Jeff, also co-author of Love Her Work, is a best-selling author and founder of Plywood People, a nonprofit in Atlanta leading a community of startups doing good. His work has been featured by Forbes, Inc., CNN, USA Weekend, and Huffington Post. He is the co-founder of Q, mentored over 600 startups, and created the largest social entrepreneur event in the South called Plywood Presents. So welcome, you guys. I'm so glad to have you here. I really enjoyed Love Her Work. There are a whole lot of super interesting things about it. So do you want to just talk a little bit about what the book is before I start asking questions?
Sure. Yeah, we can give a little premise of it. Well, I mean, I think it started around a question: is it possible to change the world, stay in love, and raise a healthy family? And that idea of like, we all want to do it all, but is it really possible to do it all? and I'm a little bit of a cynic, so I didn't believe it. And I wanted to see and ask questions. So we did a big nationwide survey and asked a lot of over 1,500 working couples and surveyed them a lot of different questions that we found a lot of interesting findings between parenting and your committed relationships and work. And then we also, so we wrote about that, and then we started interviewing couples, and we have interviewed over 100 working couples and started a podcast to kind of share their stories as well. But I mean, it really all came out of our own tensions, our own fights, our own disagreements, our own things that constantly kept surfacing. So really started with us and then kind of expanded from there.
Yeah, if you read the book, you know a lot about our fights.
We'll get
at
to
a
the
core,
down
you know,
and
like,
dirty.
and it's like, I mean, that's actually the real part of relationship, right? It's two people that you oftentimes see the world very differently, that in some way are attracted to one another. And then they got to figure out how to do this life together, you know, and super complicated. So we tell a ton of stories about moments where our two missional purpose things we're doing conflict. And so you get to know a lot about us, our story, and some things we've learned from all these incredible people we've gotten to meet along the way.
I love that your book really does sort of feel like I'm like hanging out in your living room in the middle of a conversation with you guys. I enjoyed that so much. So one of the first things that really stuck out to me when reading was you guys talked about the three great loves. And I'm not going to lie, they were not exactly what I was expecting. The first two were kind of what I expected. The third was really not. Can you talk a little bit about what the three great loves are?
Yeah, I'm guessing. So this is a premise that we've really had to work through together. First, I mean, I think most people are trying to figure out who their life partner is. Like they're on the search. You start when you're 14 years old or however old you start being attracted to someone. And you're on this like, who am I going to spend my life with? And we have tons of friends that have never found that person yet, you know, and that's really hard. But the first great love is this person you want to choose your life with. The second, that most people that we interact with, friends of ours, they would be trying to figure out, why do I exist in this world? What is my purpose? And they're on a pursuit to find this purposeful work, and they fall in love with whatever that is. I mean, the pursuit is endless. And so those two are common. And then I think, and this is really, really important, because the third great love is falling in love with your partner's purpose. And until that happened for me, until I valued her purpose as equal to my own, which is extremely, extremely hard to do, then all of a sudden, like, I always thought we both believe this, that each of our purposes is more important, honestly, in this earth. And until we started to deeply value the other's purpose as equal and care so much that she does exactly what she is made to do in this world, then we're going to have all these fights about who takes priority over everything. And so most people probably say, oh, your kids are your third greatest, but like that's added into it. And that's I think, like a little bit downstream from things we had to wrestle with earlier on in life.
I love how you guys talk about sacrificing in seasons, which I think kind of ties into that once you love your partner's purpose also. But then when you both are equal, you can't both, especially once there's children's in the equation, be equally pursuing all the time. Part of that work-life balance is balancing with your partner's work and life also. How do you know whose season it is to sacrifice and whose season it is to be sacrificed for? And what are some signs that maybe it's time to start talking about a change in that?
That's really good. I think seasons is a way that we talk about it in our book. And I love what Joanne was saying about the sway. I think it's kind of similar in that idea, but seasonally in the sense of like, there's always times that we know that my job might be a lot more busy, more important, more high demand. So for example, I'm in medicine and it's COVID time. And all of a sudden a year ago, my life became crazy and my work became insane. And so prior to that, I was kind of the steady, could leave work, come home, have a good separation. And then when COVID happened, it really erupted all of that. And so I was needed more, had to do a lot more hours, a lot more going on. And so, Jeff had to notice that and did notice that immediately and was like, literally you went into medicine for moments like this, right? This is what you're supposed to be doing. And so he took a step back and stayed home with the kids, became a teacher, did all the things while I was crazy working, But I also had to recognize that this would lead to him getting burnt out, right?
Yeah, like last night I was like, I'm done. Like I was like, it's been a year, it's been a full year, I'm done, right?
So it would lead to that, right? So there has to be an ending point of an ending of a season for it to change. And if you don't have an ending point, it's not a season, right? It's like endless. So we had to have a discussion about like, okay, so I'm going to tell work that I have to back off and that I'm taking a few breaks here and that, so that he could have time and breaks and a little bit of normalcy for him too.
And I think there has to be this open communication about it. I mean, there's
editing.
There's times that each one of us, our purpose has taken priority. There's times I've written previous books and, when you launch a book, like you have to put it all the way out there. Or I launched this nonprofit organization. It's like you launch this thing and you got to go all in and hustle, and someone isn't going to get my full self, and at those times it was probably Andre and the kids. And until she finally, like, the nice way to say is raise your hand. The real way was like, no, it's time. Like, when is it my turn? Like she would say, she had those specific links, those words that she said to me one moment. I'm like, I didn't understand what she was talking about in that moment. And so I think there has to be like this open, consistent dialogue and valuation of each other's purpose to kind of take turns, to step forward, to step back, to take the kids on, to whatever that looks like. It's a constant push and pull. And at the core of this, I think this community that we get to lead called Plywood, it's like all these super passionate people that care very deeply about what they do. And so it's hard to kind of go, well, this is really important. This person is addressing issues of homelessness. This person is doing orphan care. They're doing justice work. They're doing, name the like we have someone doing all these things, and you go, well, at some point, like you have to like close your computer and spend time with the person you love at some point, like, and this is the phrase we kept telling each other in the midst of this: if we change the world and we lose our family, we lose. And that is not an equation we want to equal up, so like we had to work at that together, and we like two very passionate people consistently having to work at it.
And that kind of ties into my next question, is about, you guys talk about clean agreements. I know in my household, my husband and I will agree on a thing in theory, but then one of us almost always ends up resentful because it didn't get done in the timeline that we thought it was going to get done in, or it didn't get done exactly the way we thought it was going to get done. And it's all kind of boundaries, but you guys talk in the book about clean agreements, and can you explain what that means?
Yeah, so we, after interviewing all these couples, we learned some tools and tricks, honestly, in the midst of it that, they don't solve everything, but like it's worked for other couples. So we shared some of those things. Then one of those was this idea of a clean agreement. This is a couple in Chicago. that both lead this entity together. And they were talking about how they would work through something in a conversation, and then it wouldn't get done, you know? And so a clean agreement has like very specific things you're agreeing to. It's what needs to get done, who's doing it, and when will it get done. And that the third one is the one where like a guy like me, I'm like, yeah, okay, I'll do it.
He's not very good at that.
And she's like, well, when are you going to do it? And it's like, because she wants it done
And then
in
he's
that
like,
moment.
stop pressuring me. Stop
Right,
pressuring me
right.
with the win.
So what we learned is like in that moment, I actually don't want to do it. But if I tell her, okay, I will get this done
Basically, you're shutting me up.
in the next 24 hours, whatever, by tomorrow when we go to bed, like there's a greater, then she's like, okay, I'm going to hold you to that. Right. But there's other things we learned. Like there's another concept that we learned that was really good, called the whiteboard concept, where this is like a couple that they're both kind of business minded, and they started realizing when there was problems happening, a lot of them, you know, some of the other panelists were talking about just the logistics of life with kids and just maintaining all of it. And they would get mad at each other because they recognize this problem in the family, and it's like, well, you're not doing, and then they would go back and forth and back and forth. And they're like, it has nothing to do with your problem or my problem. Like this is a problem for the family. So they would go into a place, they bought a whiteboard, they have it in their home office, but they would also do this like where they work. And they were like, the more that they put the problems on the board and not just point fingers at one another, then together they sit next to each other and they look up at this board and they work through things together. So anyway, so we heard all kinds of stuff like that.
I love that, because I think that's a pretty common problem with work and parenting and everything we have going on, that we get so overwhelmed with our own stuff that it was revolutionary to me, this idea of a clean agreement. Like we talk about in the first place, who, what, when. And it shouldn't be really, like that seems fairly basic, but it had never occurred to me to commit to that up front. One of the things I found fascinating about your book is that you really don't talk about the kids until you're getting kind of towards the end, that it's very much about your spouse and your work life. And as a parenting panel, right, like we kind of expect the kids to be the primary. And I actually really enjoyed that this idea that I'm hearing it now being called family-centered instead of child-centered parenting, which I feel like kind of was where you were coming from, that if the parents are taking care of everything, then the kids benefit, that then you guys have the balance, you're making sure they're taken care of. Do you feel like when you are working on that balance between the two of you, that your kids are just automatically reaping the benefits of that?
I don't know if we ever think about like working on the balance or that essentially. I think we think of it a little bit more like holistically, in the sense of like if well, we can start with just me. If I'm healthy and I'm taking care of myself, I'm going to be more apt to want to engage him and spend time with him and spend time with my kids and spend time. So I think it's like, it starts with like a wholeness in terms of like your own health and your own self-care, like the other ladies were talking about, and starting there. And so if I'm healthy, more chances are that we would be healthy too, and he's healthy, more chances are we'll be. So the individual I makes a better we. And then after that, it goes into like, if we are healthy and we've got a strong bond, then our kids are looking at that and seeing a good, healthy relationship, have, strong bonds themselves, So I think it's a trickle. I do. And I think kids seeing working parents that are committed to their jobs and what they do is always important too. My kids know exactly, as soon as if I'm walking out the door in all my scrubs and all my things, and mom, don't leave, it's a really great teaching moment to stop and say, like, what am I going to do right now? Like, where am I going? Oh, you're going to the hospital to help people with COVID. Yes, because there are a lot of people in this world besides this little family bubble that you're living in that need help, that are sick, that are dying in the hospital. So it's a good lesson for children too, to have a bigger worldview, to see their parents engaged in bigger issues, bigger things going on in the world. So I think work and that love that is between us all matters to them, you know?
Yeah, and I think part of our story is that we want to show our daughter that she can do anything she desires to do in this world. And the greatest way of doing that is for me to be in full support of Andre's purpose. So if she's doing that, that's like a lifelong concept she is learning every day. Same way we have a son that he needs to understand that also, you know? And so I think that's a core level. I also think that, like, we all have friends that center their entire lives around their children. And oftentimes those couples don't know what to do when the children leave the house. And that is why there are so many relationships that end in that season. And so if Andre and I are not good together, our family is not going to be doing good. And so we have to focus on one another first.
All right, thank you all so much. I am gonna open us up to gallery view so we can see everybody. And actually the first question I want to ask everyone kind of stemmed from love or work. And part of the research that you guys did for the book, you talk about that a significant portion of parents believe that they can do all of these things, but then also a significant portion of parents are feeling overwhelmed and exhausted, and kind of the contrast there of, we think we can do everything, but maybe we can't do it so well if we're feeling like this all the time, which ties really well into the balance issue. But where you guys go with that is in building intentionally a village to help take care of your children. And so I kind of wanted everyone to speak for a minute about that thought of, like, building a community to help support, so that we as working parents don't feel like we're responsible for all the work and all the parenting and all the house care all by ourselves as this island. So Andre and Jeff, if you want to start.
Yeah, I think we talk a little bit about it's both important for your own support, I think, but it's also important in that way that you can offer support to others. I think both are equally important. But I remember one way that was really helpful for me is like those big, like I call it like my beating my head against the wall moments that continue to happen like every week. Like, let's say math homework, you know, I can't do it. I literally cannot do it. But I know a really smart math friend person of mine that could possibly tutor or could possibly help me in those moments, instead of me just continually like beating my head against the wall with math homework. So that's like the idea of like finding your tension points and then finding that village, that support, that help in those ways, and then you being able to do that for somebody else.
Yeah, we talk about the concept of family. Like, our family doesn't live near us. We're in Atlanta and our family is all in Michigan. And so we've had to become great friends with people and acknowledge that they're kind of part of our family, which during COVID, I mean, I think finding community is really, really hard. I mean, I think one of the questions we've gotten a lot related to that is like, if you don't have that, how do you find that? And what we've found or share with people is like, well, the more you contribute to others, there tends to be reciprocation in that. So you have to go out of your way, which is really hard in this season. So, but yeah, I mean, we could not do all that we're doing by ourselves.
And Joanne, do you want to speak on that a little bit?
Well, I'd like to address it again from the context of COVID and the fact that, you know, because we're all so separated, we're also becoming much closer to each other. And I don't think we've ever seen, you know, social media be as great a boon to connecting as we have in the last year. But the other thing that's really changed is the inclusion of extended family members in that equation. You know, again, I'm a boomer, so I'm a grandmother. And my grandchildren live pretty far away in Minneapolis. But on the other hand, I've never done as many FaceTimes. My eldest granddaughter and I have started a book club together, okay? And together, she's picked out the books, but we've read about a dozen books together over the last 5 months. And once a week, and in fact, it's usually Thursday night that we have book club, but we had to put it on a back burner because of Katie Budget Books. We not just talk about the book that we're reading, but we talk about what's going on with her, and she's able to, sort of unburden. In her case, schools have opened back up, and I thought she'd be very excited to be back in school 5 days a week. But it turned out in her community in Minneapolis, the parents could choose not to send their kids back to the physical classroom, and her best friend was going to continue doing virtually, and she was very upset about that.
I have to say, I appreciate the grandma FaceTime calls as well. I have been known to dial up my mom and I'm like, they need someone to talk to that's not me. So they'll just take her around the house. Look at this, look at that, look at this. Here, I'm going to run through the hall. Look how fast I am. And bless her, because I don't know how she doesn't throw up watching these calls and being taken all over the house. But there are creative ways that even if we can't be with people physically, how can we have someone step in and support even in a virtual way?
I guess I'm the last one to chime in, but I also don't live around family. Most of my family's in Pennsylvania and I'm in South Carolina. And I am so thankful for my friends and my neighbors. I would have a really hard time without them. I think one of the hardest things for me moving to a new area, especially down to the South, there's just something about the Southern hospitality down here, and people just want to help you out and they're genuine about it. And it was really hard for me at first to accept help. I like to try to just do as much as I can on my own. But my friends have this joke about how they have running credits, and no one really means that. But for a while, it seemed like everyone's washing machine or dryer was breaking. And so everyone had laundry credits with each other, hey, I'm going to use your washer for a week, and when yours breaks, you can use mine. But it's just funny now that I've accepted the help and I like to help other people. I know how much that means to me to be able to help someone else out, and then just realizing I need to let someone else do that then back for me, get that back to me and my family.
Okay, and then I know we're a little bit over time, so I just want to ask one more quick question for everybody to answer. So since we're talking about work and life balance, what is the most helpful thing to each of you personally for trying to keep in mind that, okay, kind of centering around the parent guilt issue, right? Because I think that's kind of the crux of the work-life problem for a lot of us, is that we feel guilty either that we're not doing as much as we think we should at work or at home. What is the most helpful thing for each of you individually for kind of ameliorating that guilt, so that whatever the balance happens to be right now, or whatever sway you happen to be on, you're not sitting in that guilt? And Shari, do you want to start us out this time?
Oh, sure. Put me in the hot seat.
Sorry.
The first thing that popped into my head, though, was that as parents, a lot of times you can feel like you're wrong if you do it this way and you're wrong if you do it that way. And keeping that top of mind that, if I'm not spending quite as much time with my kids, call it rationalizing maybe, that I'm like, well, but also it's not great if I'm kind of helicoptering and I'm spending every moment with them and I'm too overly involved. So that's not great either. So, I kind of need to remind myself of that sometimes, or even take it back and really think like, how much time did my mom spend with us? And I had a great relationship with her. And that, thinking back, I can't remember a whole lot of times that we were on the floor playing together. We would do activities, we would do things. So just trying to alleviate a little bit of that you're always going to do it. But I think it really does. I mean, the biggest thing is going back to okay, I didn't have a whole lot of time. I ignored them a lot today, or I kept saying, oh, I got to finish this, or I need to do this. But then tomorrow, I'm going to make sure I tune back in. And I'm going to spend a little extra time with them. And kind of, which is what we talked about, but between those things, and maybe just accepting that you are going to feel guilty from time to time, and accept it for what it is.
Carissa?
I have learned recently, and it's something I'm still trying to work through, but just saying no to more things that's outside of our family, and just being a little bit more selfish with our family time. I just feel like right now, especially with having a new baby in the house, I only have so much energy to give every day. And I really hate when I feel like I can't execute something fully. So just trying to keep my focus really narrow and saying no. And I realize it's a phase. If I'm saying no now, it's not no forever. It's just for right now in this moment. I'm just trying to stay really laser focused.
Joanne?
I think it's really important at the end of the day to accept the fact that we're imperfect. And that's okay. We all just do our darndest. And you know what? However imperfect we are, the kids are going to turn out all right. And I have seen that in the 2 children that I gave birth to. They both turned out to be amazing, amazing individuals, far greater than I am in so many ways. And I didn't think I was all that great a parent, frankly.
I think we all sort of feel that some days. No matter how hard we're trying, we feel like we're not that great.
And that's okay.
Andre?
I think for me, I kind of started just questioning, like, where am I getting these ideas of what I'm saying that I'm doing wrong? Like, who's dictating this? Who's in charge? Who told us this? Who is this expert that knows my personal 2 children and their idiosyncrasies and their issues and their anxieties and nobody else knows them besides me and him like that. So nobody gets to really tell me what I'm going to do. Now I'm going to read books and try to help myself and try to learn, but I'm just decided that I'm done like comparing. I'm done letting other people dictate and tell me how I'm going to raise my kids or what I'm going to do. So that's me.
Yeah,
I'm kind of defiant like that.
I will say, as the only guy on the panel, I don't feel guilty. And this is like a thing that most guys don't
crazy. I ask him this all the time.
This isn't like something that I have deep within me that I feel guilt towards. And I think that's very common with a lot of guy friends that I have. Like, it's an unusual thing. But I will say this, I actually have to build more of a consciousness to be aware of that for our family versus feeling the guilt. So it's like a contrast. I do have one quick story I want to share. One thing that we do, I think a lot of times that we've learned as our kids are getting older is just bring our kids along with us, whatever we're doing, like just bring them along. And I did this fundraiser. We had forgot
to get a babysitter.
to get a babysitter because it was like
messed up.
Our son had a half day of school. I don't know why our daughter didn't. Anyway, he was doing it with me. So it was this big fundraiser, and we just realized we didn't have a sitter. I'm like, all right, Nico's coming with us, or coming with me. Andre wasn't with me; she was working. And so I just bring him along, and it's like all these fancy people. I'm supposed to be asking them money to support what we're doing, and here's Nico next to me. Well, so he's like, I need something to do. So I'm like, okay, we'll give you a job. Somehow he figured out what he wanted to do, which was he wanted to give everyone name tags at the start of the event. So meanwhile, he can barely spell. So like he's at the front of the whole event with writing with a Sharpie on name tags. And he's like, what's your name? Andre. Great. And he'd put an A on there. Maybe he might mix it. It might be AD. It doesn't spell right. And he'd just give it to him, and people be like, that's not really. And he's like, you're welcome. Like this is right. And what was cool about it is everyone just wore whatever he wrote on their shirt. Like he set the tone for this thing to not be pretentious, to be actually generous, you know, from the core. And there's no way I could have crafted that to be a better experience, you know. It was like, no, this doesn't have to be fancy. It's a luncheon, and we're talking about generosity, and my son's trying to exemplify it in his own unique way. And I think sometimes we forget that our kids can come along with us and make an experience better than what we could have done without them. So that was something I learned from him.
I love that. Thank you all so much, you guys, for joining us this evening. I just love that we are talking about this tonight, and I enjoyed all of your books. So attendees, if you didn't purchase a copy of one of the books beforehand and you would like to, there is a buy link where all of the titles are listed together on our event page. So you can just go there and purchase whichever ones you want. They are all available in store right now and all in ebook. I think Power Moms is the only one in audiobook available for download, but there are options. So thank you all so much for joining us, attendees and panelists. I really enjoyed this. And I know for some of you, especially, this is actually pretty late. So thanks for hanging in with us this evening. So y'all all have a good night.
Thank you.